Now I want to take you to the city of Renton. So just last week, the Renton police chief came out with a statement. He's like, enough is enough. We have to talk about what's happening with juveniles. We have to come up with some sort of solutions. And at the time, it was after they had arrested three 15-year-olds. And they were talking about that incident. They were in a stolen car, they were driving, they fled the scene, officers caught up to them. One had a loaded gun that he dropped while trying to escape. And again, we're talking about 15-year-olds. And in this press release, he said that there had been a 40% increase in juvenile assaults, 2022 to 2023. There was a 900% increase in juveniles committing armed robberies at gas stations, which is insane. A 342% increase in Renton in juvenile property crimes. So they're seeing the numbers just go through the roof. And the Renton police chief is like, we have to start speaking about this. We have to start talking about it honestly, and we have to look for solutions. So Renton police chief John Schuldt was nice enough to join us on the show today, but also just prior to him coming on, his office provided us with some video of just the latest crime that happened in the city of Renton involving juveniles. So we talked to him about that as well. Chief, welcome to Undivided.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I appreciate you just kind of saying what needs to be said about what we're seeing with juvenile crime. You articulated some of the numbers in a letter that you sent out last week. I mean, one of the ones that stuck out to me, 900% rise if you talk about juveniles who commit armed robberies at gas stations. That's
Right.
insane. I mean, it's not just happening in Renton, but what do you attribute this overall rise in juvie crime to?
Right. And like you said, it is not exclusive to our city, and it's a regional issue that we've been seeing. I attribute it to that they're just getting more and more emboldened. There's, I think, a lack of consequences at a certain level with it, a law without consequences is just a suggestion to them. And honestly, the suggestion ain't stopping them from doing it. It's that accountability piece, consequences associated with committing crimes, and if there aren't any for them, then they're going to just continue to cross that line and become more and more serious in what they're doing.
I like that line. I'm going to take that. A law without consequences is just a suggestion.
Right.
I like that. So we see, and we're going to talk about one of the latest crazy incidents you had there. But first, because I think it speaks to it, are you seeing with a juvie crime that it's being perpetrated by kind of a small number of juveniles who are just repeatedly committing crimes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're seeing a repeat offender, if you want to say. Over and over. We have most of these people identified and know them on site when we understand the crime, but it's getting them the help they need through some type of incarceration and programs.
So I want to talk about this latest case because it speaks to that issue. Everyone's heard by now of these Kia boys, as they call themselves, that are just out terrorizing communities in South King County. And now it appears that you guys have had a run-in with them as well. So we're going to play this video of this red Hyundai, but just sort of give us the basics of what went down.
Right. This is absolutely insane. It starts out obviously with the stolen vehicle, but then they committed a myriad of other crimes along the way, including some package theft, obviously the reckless driving, and you can see how that even gets worse as they're trying to flee from us. But at one point, and this is just what boggles my mind, is they ended up pointing a firearm at an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old that were walking home from school. For what purpose, I would have no idea, but scared those children. I mean, I can't imagine the trauma they went through having to, this group of kids pulling a gun on them and pointing it at them is absolutely incredible. But so following that, we were able to locate the vehicle. Fortunately enough, right here in Renton, Guardian One's home. So the sheriff's department helicopter was able to get up, and I think the video you have is from their perspective of following the vehicles. They drove, this is 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30, rush hour traffic as they weave through oncoming lanes, putting our entire community at risk. I mean, our whole job is to protect the safety and welfare of our community, and they just, it's a slap in the face of, trying to keep a community safe.
Yeah, a couple details of that. So at one point, they exceeded 65 miles per hour, which on those surface streets, and especially when they're going in the wrong lane of travel, is incredibly dangerous. But you mentioned air support. So one weird aspect of this is they get to South Center Mall and they almost drive the stolen vehicle under kind of this overpass where they crash it into this pole. And then they scatter and start to go into the mall. Presumably, it just feels like they knew they were being tracked by Guardian 1. Why else would they do that?
And Guardian 1, they're bailing at the mall. One just ran westbound into the parking lot. Another ran, south into the parking garage. Another ran north towards the mall.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was if it was an excellent or brilliant tactical move on their part. Finding a spot where they were partially hidden, and at that point they scatter either into the mall or out through the parking lot. We're fortunate enough, with the information we had, Guardian is absolutely incredible getting resources into the area when they knew that they were going to be heading to the mall. So there were lots of uniformed officers on scene, both from Renton and from Tukwila at that point, to help. At least Ted got 2 into custody at that time, and I think we were able to identify the other 2.
Yeah, so 14 and 16-year-old arrested. The other 2 that still have not been arrested, correct? 14 and 15?
I believe so, yes.
So they're members of the Kia Boyz.
Right.
And explain to people who aren't familiar who the Kia Boyz are.
It's kind of a group of juveniles that have fun stealing cars, and obviously the Kia and Hyundais, at that point where they're very easy targets because of the issue with being able to start them with just a fob. And so they kind of branded themselves the Kia Boyz just based off the vehicles that they were stealing and joyriding in and committing other crimes through.
Here's what I don't get, Chief. The Kia Boyz have been all over the news for doing stuff. I mean, around a school, shooting a gun into an air, stealing vehicles. How are they still out there doing these things? I guess I don't understand how they're not in jail.
Right. And that's, a question that would be posed towards the prosecutor's office and probably the juvenile judicial system. We are proactively going after them, arresting them. What happens to them once they get to juvie is kind of in their play. But
why? So when you talk about the most serious aspect of this case, which is they pointed guns at an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old who called 911. I mean, what crime is that? Is that first degree assault?
Assault, absolutely. Okay. And what we're still looking at in relation to that is being able to say exactly who the perpetrators of that were. There were 4 subjects in the vehicle. We know at least one of them pointed a firearm at these 2 children. Determining who that was, obviously, I mentioned it before, the trauma that was induced by that interaction. So being able to get the 8-year-old and the 10-year-old to be able to identify which one of those 4 in the car, should it matter? Maybe not, but being able to specifically say that one of them was that perpetrator is what we're still working on. So that part of the investigation is continuing. Yeah,
because what baffles me here is, and I'm not saying I blame your officers, I don't know whose decision this is, but just generally speaking, so the 2 that were arrested, the 14 and 16-year-old, again, well-known, like member of the Kia Boyz, they put the 8 and 10-year-olds at danger, swerved all through traffic, bailed on foot. They were released to family members after they were arrested. Why?
Yes, but again, it goes to what crime could we prove at that specific moment. We know that they're involved with it. We had plenty of reasonable suspicion to detain them while we work on our investigation, but we weren't able to definitively have probable cause at the time to incarcerate them.
Because something tells me that their family is not doing a pretty good job at, for a regular kid that gets in trouble and gets handed over to their family, there might be some more severe consequences from their parents than the judicial system. But given that they're members of the Kia Boyz, I tend to think that's probably not the case.
No, and there could be a whole myriad of situations or circumstances around why the family may not be helping. And that's what we're looking at, right? We don't think incarceration's for every kid that commits a crime, but you should look at the severity of the crime versus what the punishment is. And even for those incarcerated, it's still, we need to look at counseling or programs, mentorship or something. And what resources do the family need? Well, how can we help them in that aspect?
100%. And you said you had a quote in this press release that was put out that I just think is spot on. And it honestly, I could apply this quote to so many of the crises that we're facing in this state. You said we need not only to start talking about this escalating situation, but we need to start focusing on solutions, which include accountability for actions. Right. Just talking about it and just saying what's true. We have a crisis with juvenile crime. That is undeniable. I think that's step number one. And then just putting the rhetoric aside and talking about solutions. I mean, what are some of the things that would be helpful, you believe, Chief, to reduce the amount of juvenile crime happening in your community?
Well, again, it comes down to, we've mentioned it throughout this, is just consequences. Knowing that, if you commit a crime, you're going to be held responsible for that. And you're going to have to do time away from your friends and away from your family. And, jail's not there, as a place for recreation. It's there for you to have the time to reflect on what you did and hopefully come out of that and be a productive part of society. And, all these, you talk about 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they shouldn't be out committing crimes. They should be in school, and it's just, and this was just one example, the example from a week ago when we had 3 15-year-olds in a stolen vehicle with a handgun. Both of them, it's where are we as a society failing? This is a whole generation that's getting left behind. That's scary, and at the price of our communities and their safety.
Yeah. And also, I would say for people who think it's empathetic, to take it easy on these juveniles, no, they're going to end up dead later in life. I mean, we just had these 2 16-year-old gangbangers who were found shot execution style, their bodies dumped on the side of I-5.
Right. And I've heard the argument, physiologically that juveniles, their brains aren't developed to the point where they understand the difference between right and wrong, or, the capacity to contemplate, their actions. And, I have children and they understood the right from wrong, and, certain actions just are going to end up being punished for. And I just think the argument is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and also, they're not going to understand right from wrong if they never face consequences for something they do that's wrong. How is that not, that's not teaching them that something's wrong? It just makes no sense.
And then I think the empathetic thing to do is to hold them accountable.
Yes.
I mean, they're, like you said, later in life, we're not doing them any favors. And that's why I say, as a generation, we're absolutely failing them as a society.
100%. Well, Chief, thank you for doing the very simple thing of just speaking out about this and trying to encourage people to take it seriously and letting people know when these things happen and the impact it's having on the community. That's where it starts. So I also, just really quick, Chief, was it your officers who responded to that fatal collision involving the children?
It was not. That was just outside of our city limits. That would have been in King County.
Gotcha. Gosh, what a horrible situation that was too. And again, an 18-year-old behind the wheel, and it's just unreal, the lawlessness that we're seing. So,
well, acting in an absolutely reckless manner, just like you saw in that video of these 4, right, in their Hyundai,
right,
going through intersections, wrong sides of traffic. It's just.
Yeah, could have very easily killed someone, as you said. You're lucky that we're lucky that no one died in all of this. So, Chief, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, my pleasure. That's
Renton Police Chief John Schuldt joining us. And the kids are not all right. First of all, the kids are absolutely not all right. And even if you've got kids that aren't committing egregious criminal acts and out there with guns and stolen vehicles, I also still think we have a lot of issues happening with our juvenile around mental health, around, again, this inability to form meaningful relationships with other human beings. There's so much going on. And if we can't put sort of the politics aside and also understand that coddling them isn't the answer, teaching them in school that there aren't consequences for their actions, that they don't have to meet academic standards or behavioral standards, what kind of adults do you think they're going to freaking be? It's wild to me, these adults who think they're doing things to help these kids, and it's the opposite. And like the gang members in Seattle, if they keep going down this path, they're just going to wind up dead. And then how much help did you give them by coddling them in the criminal justice system?